I believe that there's too much information out there to not be evidence driven about the way we execute some tactics or utilize equipment. For example, utilizing a shield in certain situations versus not having that shield and how that could benefit you, or utilizing a red dot on your optic versus iron sights when faced with a perceived threat. Over the past couple months, it's come to my attention that there are people out there who say things like, you don't need a red dot optic on your handgun. And when they say that you don't need it, they're basically implying that they don't understand that a red dot optic can provide you a tactical advantage when you're faced with a perceived threat. In 2023, there was a white paper published by Sage Dynamics where they compared the accuracy of iron sights to red dot optics when officers were faced with a contextually relevant threat in force on force. That entire white paper or study is 70 pages long. I'll have it linked in the description because I'm certainly not going to cover every aspect of that paper itself. What I will be covering are the things that I think are most important to get this message across, and that is the visual and mental implications during a force on force and the advantage of red dot optics. If you haven't done so already and you want to support the channel, you can do that by liking this video, leaving a comment down below, and subscribing to the channel if you're not already. In a study in 1851, an individual published the Handbook of Physiological Optics. He noted that stress in the body had a high likelihood of causing involuntary reactions such as a loss of near focus. Just like you've been taught and I've been taught when it comes to handguns or rifles and utilizing iron sights, you're going to first focus on the threat, identify that that threat needs to be addressed, bring your sights in alignment, your rear sight with your front sight, and then your rear sight will be blurry and you're supposed to be focusing on your front sight. This is saying that back in 1851, when this book was published, they identified that stress in the body, the physiological responses to that stress, can cause involuntary reactions such as a loss of near focus, which implies that it makes it difficult or unlikely that you'll be able to actually focus on your front sight. In a separate study, a researcher noted the release of a number of hormones and neurosignals to prepare the body for attack, defense, or fleeing danger to stimulus, called general adaptation syndrome. This causes measurable changes in the body, which affects performance, reasoning, and vision. Now, if you're an officer on the street, you've been faced with a perceived threat or involved in a critical incident, then you understand how the physiological responses to stress can affect your performance, or even if you've just been a part of any force-on-force scenario. Maybe you did things that you don't know why you did them, or you look back on your body cam and you realize you said things you don't remember saying. These are all the physiological responses to stress that are affecting your ability to perform. When faced with a perceived threat, changes occur in a short period of time when the central nervous system is active, at the degree at which the changes affect performance or the specific functionality of specific area organ function is dependent on a number of contextual and training factors. Depending on the situation you're in, how much time you have versus how much time you think you have, how significant the threat is, how much training you have, how much experience you have, all of these things can affect the degree at which your central nervous system is impacted, thus in turn affecting your performance. For this study, Sage Dynamics focused strictly on the eye and the SNS and mental processes in relation to the officer's ability to see and, more importantly, process what is being seen. Under stress, when the physiological effects of adrenaline and cortisol occur in the body, the pupils become dilated, eliminating the possibility for near focus. So when faced with a contextually relevant threat or an actual threat, your pupils will become restricted, making it, as they say, basically impossible for you to near focus. I wouldn't necessarily say it's impossible. I would just say it's extremely unlikely that you'll be capable of near focus, which is a problem if they're telling you to focus on your front sight. Also, cortisol being released in your body is going to force you to focus on the most important thing in that moment. And the most important thing in that moment when you're faced with the threat is the threat itself, which again is a problem if they're telling you to focus on your near sight. So what we're basically doing when we're teaching front sight focus with iron sights is telling them to do something when faced with a contextually relevant threat that their brain will not allow them to do because they are feeling the physiological responses to stress. In this study, they utilized 110 officers over a 3-year period in force-on-force incidents, and these officers had anywhere from 0 to 21 years experience. Before I go over the results where they compare red dot hit factor to iron sight hit factor in force-on-force situations, I already went over the problems associated with teaching front sight focus when faced with a contextually relevant threat. You're being faced with that threat. You're being filled with the physiological responses to stress. The cortisol and the adrenaline is constricting your pupils and also forcing you to continue focusing on that threat. And then we're asking officers or individuals to focus on the threat, identify that's a threat, draw their firearm, align 2 different focal points with equal distance and equal height against one another, and then focus on that front sight, which is I would just say near impossible to do, or extremely unlikely you will be able to do that, especially when we're trying to do that in a compressed time frame. Now, the benefits of having a red dot optic or utilizing a red dot optic is that you can navigate or circumvent this issue by continuously focusing on that threat and then superimposing that red dot between you and the threat. I'll show you the hit map here in a second so we can see actually where those rounds impacted on those threats, but this chart is a direct comparison between the red dot optic performance and their iron sight performance as it relates to accuracy. So you can see on the left side, you have the red dot. They fired 262 times. They had 192 hits, 134 critical hits, and they missed 70 times. On the iron sight side, they fired 291 rounds. They hit 171 times. They had 48 critical hits, and they missed 120 times. So what this chart indicates is that those with red dot optics fired about 30 less rounds, probably because they got good hits initially and the threat was no longer a threat, or they just simply identified that this person was no longer a threat, therefore shooting less rounds. And of the rounds that they did fire, they hit the threat more often. Those with red dot optics had almost 3 times as many critical hits, and those with iron sights missed almost twice as much. And if you look at the human body on the hit map, iron sights versus red dot optics, you can see that a majority of the red dot optic rounds actually hit in the vital area, or you can see them centered on the chest. What the study indicates is that if officers are utilizing red dot optics, regardless of their experience, they're going to shoot less, they're going to hit the threat more, and they're just going to miss less. There was a piece that I read from another study where it said that although quality and quantity of firearms training has increased since the 19th century, marksmanship on the streets, hit factor on the streets has only marginally improved. And I have long speculated that I believed that the reason it has improved isn't because the quality and quantity of marksmanship training has increased or gotten better since the 19th century, and everybody would agree that it has, but it's because the use and the utilization of red dot optics, because a red dot optic is more likely going to afford an officer the opportunity to continuously focus on the threat and have the ability to superimpose that red dot on that threat versus trying to align two mechanical points and then focus near focus when your brain is telling you to continuously focus on that threat.